Hey and welcome to the tutorial. Today I will show you how to create this cool looking circle chart inside Microsoft Excel, and as you can see this is clearly inspired by the Apple Watch workout graphs, which are also circular. And since this is done in Microsoft Excel, everything is fully dynamic, so I can change the percentage, maybe 60, maybe this would be like 80, this could be, I don't know, 75 or 45, whatever. You can see that I can change those values and the graphs will update for me automatically, which is kind of cool. I can even change the scaling, so maybe make this a little bit closer to each other by saying this would be 0.85 and this would be 0.7, or the other way around, like this would be 0.7 and this would be 0.4 to keep the same spacing. You can see not everything is dynamic, those labels that would have to be moved manually. But for example, if I, let me just set this back to where it was. If I rename this to, for example, swimming, the label will update as well, which is kind of cool. Okay, so let's see how we can create such graph in Microsoft Excel from scratch. I will start with a blank document, and if you have ever played with the graphs inside Excel, I will just type in random values just so I can insert the graph. Insert graph. You can see that there is this donut chart, which is kind of cool, but there is this straight line between those segments and there is nothing that we can do with this straight line. So if we are aiming for those rounded endings, which we are of course, we cannot use this kind of chart, which is unfortunate, and we have to use a very different chart. And the different chart will be, if I can change chart type, it would be the XY scatter, which allows us to plot any kind of shape using the X and Y values. So you can see it doesn't go from left to right, it can go back and maybe change to different shapes, whatever. We will try to plot a circle. Now in order to know how to plot a circle, we need to know how to construct a circle. And there's this nice animation on Wikipedia which shows how to plot a circle using the sine and cosine function. I also have a lot of Word tutorials which describes this, so make sure to check those as well. So as you can see, if we change the cosine, if we plot the cosine function using a different angle and plug it into the x-axis and sine into the y-axis, we will get a nice looking circle. Now the cosine for x and sine for y, it's just, the matter of choice, just so that the angle starts in and the zero starts in here. But if we change those to be a sine for x and cosine for y, actually the zero angle would be on top, which is what we want. So let's try to do it. We need few things. Let me get rid of this chart and those values. We need, of course, the angle. Let me just right angle. We need the x position and we need the y position. Sorry, the y position. Okay, so the angle will go from 0 to 360, and maybe we will go with 10 increments, and we will go from 0 to 360, like so, 360. And so for the y position, we will say y position equals sine function, and the sine function requires the angle in radians, which are from minus pi to pi. Y will have the degrees, which goes from 0 to 360, so we need to convert it first. And thankfully there is this function called radians, which converts degrees, angle in degrees into angle in radians. So we will say I want to use this angle, and I will close the brackets. And maybe before I press the enter key, I will say that this cell will have the $sign before the A, just so that the column A doesn't change. So if I drag this to anywhere else, I will press the enter key and just copy this for every single cell, like so. And I will use the same function or for the y position, but of course I will change this to cosine function, so cosine radians A4. Now as you can see, since I've put this $sign before the A, I don't have to change anything else except for the function from sine to cosine. I will just copy this for every single cell, like so. Then I will select those two columns, like so. I don't need to select the headers, and I will add a new chart. So insert recommended chart, and immediately you can see that I have this scatter chart recommended for me, but I need probably a different kind of scattered chart. So I'll go to all charts, XY scatter, and I will select this one, which is the scatter with smooth lines without any markers. And of course I need this type, but this is just a matter of how to interpret the data. I can change it later. Anyway, I will select this one and press OK, and what we get is a nice looking circle, which is kind of great because that's the main part of our tutorial. Okay, so we know how to draw a circle. Let's see if we can draw just a part of the circle. And we will do it by not going from 0 to 360, but maybe to some different number. So let's quickly try to go from 0 to maybe put the 8 as an increment. So I will go 0, 8, 16, and so on. And I will end up on the angle 288. And immediately you can see that we only draw a part of the circle. What I can do is I can try to right click this and select the format data series. and change the line width to maybe, I don't know, like 20 points, so we can see that it will work perfectly fine. So now when we know how to plot a circle and how to plot only part of the circle, let's see how we can make this more dynamic, so we don't have to manually adjust those values, and we can just drive everything with just one value. So what I will do is I will add a few more cells in here, 3 more rows, so I have a space, and I will try to insert actually even one more column in here. And I will have two types of angle. I will have the angle, let's call it angle global, and the angle which will be adjusted based on our percentage. So let's call this %, and we will plug in some value. So let's say I only want to go from 0 to 80%. So let's type in 80. And for the angle global, I will always go from 0 to 360. So let's go from 0 to 360. And in the angle adjusted, which is our angle, I will go from 0 to whatever its maximum %. So it will be equals, one more time, equals this cell times 80%. Of course, this is not percent, so I will just divide it by 100. And again, I will put some $sign. So the A will be always the same. So I will put a $sign in here. And probably the C will be always the same as well. Let me think about it. Actually, no, actually the 3 will be always the same. The C could be changing. Let's see if this works. So I will copy this for every single cell. And it goes from 0 to 288. So it's always almost the same as the previous. So let's go with 50%. And you can see that it changed. But it changed in the way that we only see, it's kind of squeezed. And we don't see half of the circle. We see some stretch circle instead. Or stretch part of the circle instead. And that's because Microsoft Excel tries to make the chart as small as possible. So what I will do is I will click on this axis, and I will say that it goes from -1.2, let's say, to 1.2. And I don't want to see any labels, so for the labels I will set it to none. And I will do the same for the x-axis. I want to go from -1.2, actually to 1.2. And even then, here I don't want to see any labels. Okay, so now whatever we change this value to, it will just update, but we will not change the zoom level or how big the chart is, which is great. So seems like all the values are working as expected. The only missing part is what if we want to change the scale of the circle. And we will do it by simply multiplying those two functions by a certain value. So let's call it the scale value, and let's do it like 0.5. And what we will do is we will multiply this by this value. So this function multiplied by the scale. And in here I will say that the 3 will not change. Okay, the 3 will not change, so I'll insert the $sign. I'll do the same in here as well. So I can just maybe copy this one. So I will copy this one times the 3. Okay. And you can see that immediately the first point jumped more to the center. If I copy those for each cell, you know, the circle will get smaller. So I can control the size with this scale cell. Maybe go even, you know, outside of the boundaries if I want. Okay, so everything is working as expected. Let's see if we can get multiple different lines in one chart. And hopefully if we have set everything in the right way, we can just copy and paste this. Copy those 3 columns and paste those. And in the chart itself, I will right click and select data. So we already have this series 1. I will probably edit this and call it, it's like the first series. And let's add a new one, which will be the second series. For the x values, I will use those x positions. And for the y values, I will use those y positions. Like so. And let's see if this works. Now you cannot see anything because the scale is the same. So if I set the scale to 0.8, you can see this very thin line. Again, I can just click the line and set the line width to maybe like 20 points. And if I change the percentage, you know, it works. Should be working, but it's not working. So something is probably wrong. If I take a look here, it's using the angle from B3. Okay, so we've made something wrong. It should be using the angle from F6. So the dollar sign shouldn't be there. Sorry for this one. The dollar sign shouldn't be there. Let's try to do it one more time. And probably the angle is also using the wrong. No, it's using the right. Okay, so it should be using this angle, and this one should be using this angle. Hopefully now it will be working. Okay, so now it goes only to 50%. If I go to 40, everything looks fine. So let's try to copy those 3 columns one more time. I will copy those in here. And again, I will right click this and select data and add new entries, which will be third entry. Of course, I can do some more meaningful name, just first, second, and third. Again, set the X values and Y values. Like so. Okay. I will set the spacing to be, or scaling to be 0.6. Select this line, make it bolder, so like 20 points, and see if the percentage works. So 40. Okay, now everything seems to be working, which is great. Let's call this 80. Okay, so the only missing part is to make sure that there are no distracting elements. So I will select this plus sign and select I don't want any axes or grid lines. For the background of the chart, I will use a solid fill, which will be black. Actually, let's not do it for the chart, but for the entire chart like this one, I will set the solid fill to be black. This one, and maybe for the individual lines, I will set similar lines colors as I've used for my tutorial or for my previous example. So the first line will be like pink, so more colors. I've probably used one of those down here, like maybe this one, pink. The second one was, hopefully, I think it was green, so let's use a green color. And the third one could be blue. So the last one would be blue, like so. Okay, they are probably a little bit different, but you get the point. You can choose any colors you want. Now, if I compare this graph with my previous creation, you will see that we have those labels which updates. We also have those background circles, which kind of shows us the maximum values. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can also see there is this like a drab shadow, below the tip of the chart, of the line. So I think we can keep this for the next part of the tutorial. Let's end here, and thank you for watching. That's it for today.